You think you know danger when you see it. The obvious red flags, the screaming, the manipulation. But what if I told you that the most destructive people in your life are the ones who seem perfectly normal? The ones you love, the ones you trust, the ones who drain your soul so quietly, you don't even notice until you're empty. Through decades of clinical work, Carl Jung mapped out specific patterns these people follow. 6 distinct ways that unconscious people colonize your psychic space without you even realizing it's happening. But these patterns don't exist in a vacuum. They're part of a larger psychological machinery that Jung spent his life understanding. And to recognize these people in your own life, you first need to understand how this machinery actually operates. Because the real danger isn't just in identifying them, it's in understanding why they keep showing up, and why breaking free feels so impossibly difficult. You've been taught to watch out for the obvious predators, the narcissists, the sociopaths, the ones who come at you with fangs bared and intentions clear. But what about the ones who come disguised as concern, as love, as family? Carl Jung dedicated his life to understanding the human psyche, and his discoveries were disturbing. In his work, Aion and the Ego and the Unconscious, he revealed something most people never see. The greatest psychological danger doesn't come from conscious evil. It comes from unconscious wounding, from people so disconnected from their own darkness that they spray it everywhere, like emotional radiation. Jung understood that most of what truly governs us is not under our conscious control. This applies not just to you, it applies to everyone around you. And that's precisely where the danger lies. Because when someone is blind to their own shadow, that darkness seeks a host, and often that host is you. You know these people. You've felt their impact. That friend who somehow always makes you feel guilty. That family member who drains your energy with a single text. That partner who loves you so intensely it feels like suffocation. That colleague who's always the victim but never takes responsibility. They're not trying to hurt you. That's what makes them so dangerous. See, conscious cruelty you can defend against. You can see it coming. You can build walls. But unconscious toxicity? That seeps through the cracks of your empathy. It disguises itself as need, as love, as good intentions. Jung called this projection, an unconscious mechanism where people project onto you what they refuse to see in themselves. From that moment on, you cease to be a person and become a symbol, a mirror, an imaginary enemy, an idealized savior. And all these images have something in common. None of them is truly you. And before you know it, you're not living your life anymore. You're managing theirs. Jung called this psychological colonization. When someone else's unconscious content starts running your life, when their unprocessed trauma becomes your daily reality, when their shadow becomes your burden to carry. Most people never realize they're trapped in these dynamics. They think they're being loving, supportive, the good person in a difficult situation. But here's what Jung knew. You can't save someone who refuses to see themselves, and trying to do so will cost you everything you are. As Jung wrote, what we do not confront in ourselves, we will encounter as fate. And often, this fate has a name, a face, and sits across from you at dinner. We live in a culture that glorifies emotional labor, that tells us love means accepting everything, that healthy boundaries are selfish, that walking away makes you the bad person. Social media feeds us a steady diet of toxic positivity disguised as wisdom. Everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about. Hurt people. Choose compassion. All true, and all completely missing the point. Because while you're busy being understanding, while you're making excuses for their behavior, while you're trying to love them better, you're slowly disappearing. Jung saw this pattern everywhere in his clinical work. People who mistake emotional fusion for connection, who think love means having no boundaries, who believe that healing others is more noble than healing themselves. In Psychological Types, Jung warned about what he called psychic contagion, how unconscious people transmit their internal chaos to everyone around them. It's not intentional, but it's devastating. Their anxiety becomes your anxiety. Their drama becomes your emergency. Their wounds become your daily reality. But here's the brutal truth. You can't love someone into wholeness. You can't empathize someone into self-awareness. You can't sacrifice your way into their transformation. What you can do is lose yourself trying. The culture tells us this is heroic. Jung knew it was tragic, because every minute you spend managing someone else's unconscious is a minute stolen from your own becoming. Every ounce of energy you pour into their bottomless well is energy that could have been used to build the life you actually want. And the cruelest part? They rarely get better from your sacrifice. They just learn to depend on it. Jung observed that these dynamics often emerge from what he called the participation mystique, a primitive psychological state where people can't distinguish between themselves and others. They literally don't know where they end and you begin, so their feelings become your responsibility, their problems become your mission, their healing becomes your obsession. This isn't about becoming heartless. It's about understanding the difference between compassion and self-destruction, between supporting someone and becoming their emotional life support system. Jung spent decades mapping these patterns, not to make us cynical, but to make us free. Let me paint you a picture of what happens when you live too close to unconscious toxicity. You start second-guessing everything. Your feelings become unreliable. Your memories feel distorted. You find yourself constantly explaining, defending, apologizing for existing. That confidence you used to have? Gone. Those dreams you were working toward? Postponed indefinitely because there's always another crisis to manage. You become hypervigilant, walking on eggshells, reading micro-expressions like your life depends on it. Because in a way, it does. Your peace depends on their mood. Your day depends on their energy. Your self-worth depends on their approval. This is what Jung called psychic infection, when someone else's unprocessed trauma becomes the operating system of your life. Jung wrote extensively about how unintegrated psychological content seeks expression through others. In his work, The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious, he explained how people become unwilling carriers of someone else's psychological material. You literally start living their unlived life, feeling their unfelt emotions, fighting their unfinished battles. And here's the thing that'll mess you up. These people often seem to need you more than anyone else ever has. They make you feel special, chosen, like you're the only one who truly understands them. It's intoxicating, until it isn't. Until you realize that what you thought was love was actually a hostage situation. What you thought was connection was actually consumption. What you thought was helping was actually enabling. Jung observed this pattern in countless cases. People who become so enmeshed in someone else's psychology that they lose access to their own. He called it psychic possession, when another person's unconscious content literally possesses your mental space. The cost isn't just your peace of mind, it's your potential, your growth, your becoming. Because while you're managing their chaos, you're not building your own order. While you're healing their wounds, your own stay untreated. While you're living their story, yours goes unwritten. Jung called this the sacrifice of the individual to the collective unconscious. But it's simpler than that. It's the death of you, one small compromise at a time. You start to feel like you're going crazy. You question your own perceptions, your own memories, your own emotional responses. Jung had a term for this too: psychological gaslighting, caused by living in someone else's projected reality for too long. Eventually, you forget who you were before you met them. You can't remember what you wanted before their needs became your priority. You lose track of your own voice because you've been speaking their language for so long. Jung identified patterns, archetypal ways that unconscious people colonize the lives of others. Understanding these isn't about judgment, it's about recognition, because you can't protect yourself from what you can't see. Type 1. The unconscious projector. This is someone who throws their inner world onto you like you're a movie screen. They don't see you. They see their own unprocessed stuff reflected back. Jung defined projection as the process whereby an unconscious content is transferred to an external object. But let me translate. They make you responsible for everything they can't handle in themselves. You become their therapist, their punching bag, their savior, their enemy, sometimes all in the same conversation. Everything you do gets filtered through their wounds. Every interaction becomes about managing their projections. They'll blame you for their feelings, make you responsible for their healing, and somehow convince you it's all normal. The scary part? They believe it too. In Jung's work with patients, he found that people caught in heavy projection literally cannot see the other person. They only see their own psychological material reflected back. Type 2. The persona prisoner. In The Ego and the Unconscious, Jung wrote extensively about the persona, the social mask we wear to fit in. But some people become so identified with their mask that there's nothing real left underneath. These people have confused their mask with their face. They've become so identified with their role, the perfect parent, the successful professional, the spiritual person, that their authentic self has suffocated. Being around them feels like being in a museum. Everything's perfect, nothing's alive. They expect you to play your part in their performance, and they panic when you show real emotions because it threatens their whole construction. Jung warned that over-identification with the persona leads to what he called psychic inflation. They become addicted to the image and terrified of anything that might crack it. Your spontaneity becomes their threat. Your authenticity becomes their enemy. Type 3. The shadow denier. Jung's concept of the shadow, everything we repress about ourselves, is crucial here. These people have spent so much energy being good that their darkness has gone underground and turned toxic. They're the ones who never get angry until they explode, who never have needs until they become desperate, who never make mistakes until they make catastrophic ones. In Aion, Jung explained how the denied shadow doesn't disappear, it festers. It becomes projected onto others, or it erupts in passive-aggressive behavior, moral superiority, and impossible standards. Their repressed shadow poisons every relationship. They become passive-aggressive, morally superior, impossible to please, and somehow, you always end up feeling like you're the problem. That's because they've made you the carrier of everything they refuse to acknowledge in themselves. Type 4. The moral controller. These people have weaponized righteousness. They use guilt, shame, and moral superiority to control everyone around them. Jung saw this pattern frequently. People who use morality as a defense against their own shadow material. They're not trying to be evil, they genuinely believe they're helping you become better. But their help feels like suffocation. Their care feels like control. Their love feels like a prison with very comfortable bars. Jung wrote about how extreme moral positions often mask their opposite in the unconscious. The more rigidly moral someone appears, the more likely they are to be compensating for denied impulses, and they need you to be bad so they can feel good. Type 5. The complex-driven. Jung discovered that unhealed trauma creates autonomous complexes, emotional landmines that explode without warning. In The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, he described complexes as having a certain autonomy. They can obsess consciousness. These people are walking trigger festivals. One minute they're fine, the next they're in a full emotional flashback, and you're somehow the enemy. They react to the ghosts in their head, not the person in front of them. Living with them is like living in an emotional war zone. You never know what innocent comment will activate their complex and send them spiraling. But here's the key. When someone is in the grip of a complex, Jung noted, they're literally not present. The complex is running the show. Type 6. The psychic vampire. They don't want your time or your help. They want your life force. Every conversation leaves you drained. Every interaction requires you to manage their emotions, solve their problems, or absorb their chaos. Jung wrote about people who, unable to generate their own psychic energy, become dependent on others for emotional sustenance. He called this psychic parasitism. They literally feed off your attention, your empathy, your energy. They're masters at making you feel guilty for having boundaries, selfish for having needs, cruel for wanting space. Before you know it, you're living to avoid their next crisis instead of building your own dreams. Jung observed that these people often have what he called an inferior relationship to their own unconscious. They can't self-regulate, so they need constant external validation and support to function. Here's what Jung knew that most people don't. You cannot heal unconscious people by becoming unconscious yourself. You cannot love someone into awareness by sacrificing your own. You cannot save someone who refuses to see themselves, and trying to do so doesn't make you noble. It makes you complicit in your own destruction. The shift starts with a radical realization. Their unconscious patterns are not your responsibility to fix. Their emotional regulation is not your job to manage. Their growth is not your project to complete. Your job, your only job, is to become conscious yourself. to recognize these patterns when they show up, to protect your energy like the precious resource it is. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But here's what he meant. Accepting yourself includes accepting your right to boundaries, your right to peace, your right to choose who gets access to your energy. The recognition practice. Start paying attention to how you feel after spending time with people, not what they said or did, but how your energy changed. If you consistently feel drained, anxious, or confused after being with someone, that's information. Trust it. Jung taught that the body holds wisdom the mind often misses. Your nervous system knows the difference between nourishing connection and toxic consumption long before your thoughts catch up. The boundary revolution. Boundaries aren't walls, they're the immune system of the soul. They don't keep love out, they keep toxicity from poisoning love. Practice saying no without explanation. Practice leaving conversations that aren't serving you. Practice choosing your peace over their comfort. Jung believed that healthy individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires what he called the courage to be disliked. Sometimes protecting your psychic health means disappointing people who have grown comfortable with your dysfunction. The energy audit. Look at where your mental and emotional energy goes each day. How much is spent managing other people's emotions versus building your own life? How much is reactive versus creative? The numbers might shock you. In his analytical practice, Jung found that people often gave away 80% of their psychological energy to managing others' unconscious material. Imagine what you could create if you reclaimed even half of that. The mirror work. Here's the hardest part. Recognize which of these patterns live in you. We all have unconscious moments. We all project sometimes. The difference is whether we're willing to see it and own it. Jung's process of shadow work isn't just about accepting your dark side. It's about recognizing when you're operating from unconscious patterns and making a different choice. Self-awareness is the antidote to unconscious toxicity, both in yourself and in your tolerance for it from others. The sovereignty practice. Start making decisions based on what's right for your growth, not what's comfortable for others. Start speaking your truth, even if it disrupts their narrative. Start living your life, even if it disappoints their expectations. Jung called this the realization of the self, the process of becoming who you actually are instead of who others need you to be. It requires what he termed the transcendent function, the ability to hold the tension between your authentic self and the expectations placed on you, and choose authenticity. This isn't about becoming cold or heartless. It's about understanding the difference between compassion and self-destruction, between helping someone and enabling them, between love and codependence. Real love doesn't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. As Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you can't become yourself while you're busy becoming someone else's emotional support system. Jung spent his life studying the human psyche, and he came to a profound conclusion. The greatest service you can provide the world is to become fully conscious yourself, not to fix everyone around you, not to absorb their pain or manage their chaos, but to do your own inner work so completely that you stop being a magnet for unconscious people. Because here's what happens when you reclaim your sovereignty. You stop attracting people who need you to be incomplete. You start attracting people who celebrate your wholeness. You stop being drawn to relationships that diminish you and start creating connections that elevate everyone involved. This doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you care about them enough to refuse to enable their unconsciousness. You love them enough to not rescue them from the growth their pain is trying to catalyze. Most importantly, you love yourself enough to stop sacrificing your becoming for someone else's comfort. The most dangerous people in your life aren't the ones who hate you. They're the ones who love you in ways that keep you small, who need you in ways that keep you stuck, who care about you in ways that keep you from becoming who you're meant to be. Jung knew something revolutionary. You can't save anyone else until you save yourself first. You can't wake anyone else up until you become fully conscious. You can't love anyone else into wholeness until you become whole yourself. Your life is not a rescue mission. It's not a therapy session. It's not a project to fix everyone who crosses your path. Your life is your masterpiece, your becoming. Your one chance to see what you're actually capable of when you stop giving your power away to people who don't even know they're taking it. The question isn't whether you'll encounter these 6 types of people. You will. The question is, will you recognize them? Will you protect yourself? Will you choose your growth over their comfort? Will you finally understand that the most loving thing you can do for unconscious people is to refuse to join them in their unconsciousness? Your future self is waiting, but they can only emerge when you stop trying to save everyone else and start becoming who you were meant to be. The choice, as always, is yours. But now you see it, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's exactly where your freedom begins.